Hey everyone, welcome to Noetic Films. And when I was a kid, my grandparents owned a cabin out in Killeen, Texas, and they still do. And when we would drive up there, we would always pass through a town called Brenham. And on the left side of the highway, heading up there, we'd pass what looked like an abandoned western town with all of the buildings painted. Not exactly a neon, but they were very bright colors, and it always stood out to me as very strange, and I always wanted to visit, but we never happened to stop by. And it wasn't until last year that I actually started looking into it, and thought I'd tell you a little bit about the town while showing you how it's looked for better and worse over the last 20 years. Sadly, there's not a lot of available footage of the town in its heyday, since its heyday was so short and it never really got off the ground, and we'll get into that in a minute. So in the 1980s, there was a man living in Brenham named Raymond Henry Winkelmann Jr., who went by Ray. And Ray was a historian and an antiques dealer who's been credited with putting Brenham on the map as an antiques destination. And now, one of the things Ray absolutely hated was seeing century-old buildings get torn down. He just hated it. So he had amassed this collection of about 150 structures from the last century or two that he had saved from demolition with his own money. And he just sort of had them sitting around these various properties that held these buildings that he didn't really know what to do with. And a banker friend of his who had access to some land off the highway suggested that Ray take some of the structures and put them onto land and make a tourist destination out of them. And Ray just loved the sound of that, so he took the loan and got about 5 acres of land and put about 19 of his structures on there with the goal of making it a tourist stop. He had this great idea of Winkelmann, as he named it, putting Brenham on the map and being a place where families could come and live in history. He wanted to share his passion with others and saw it as a new goal in his life to make the town his life's work. And from the tourist perspective, it was fairly successful when it opened in 1983. It had the feel of living history mixed with modern times. It had its own saloon, a general store, several restaurants that Ray himself would cook in sometimes, and several of the buildings were leased out to already existing businesses in Brenham so that they could have a share in it. And he had this grand vision of it being like a refuge for artists, and like he would have cottages on the site and would lease them out to artists that wanted to come and stay there as a retreat to be able to work on their craft. And while it was incredibly popular with the tourists, it wasn't so popular with the town itself. Because while Ray was a well-liked guy who was spoken of incredibly highly by his friends and family, even to this day, he was gay. And being an openly gay individual in a small town in the heart of the Bible Belt wasn't the best way to get people on your side. It didn't help either when, in the mid to late 80s, Ray found out that he had contracted AIDS. After word got out about that, it all just went out the window. There was a lot of paranoia when AIDS first came onto the scene that led to a lot of gay men being ostracized as lepers. And with Ray being involved in everything on the property, from upkeep to cooking, people shied away from the property. Ray ended up losing the property in 1986 due to lack of business, and the property and everything on it ended up being turned over to the bank. Ray's dream of Winkelmann had collapsed, but he kept fighting to fund it and bring his vision to life until the end of his life. In 1994, Ray sadly passed away from complications due to AIDS. The property passed from the bank through several owners over the years, sitting desolate and nearly untouched from 1986 until the 2010s. The walls were boarded up to prevent squatters, but other than that, not much was done to maintain the property. Eventually, sometime in the late 2010s and early 2020s, the owner of the property decided that he would tear down the structures and clear the land in order to make room for an RV park. That is a horribly depressing end to Ray's dream, I know. Now, in this video, you've seen Winkelmann in various states of decay from 2007, 2010, and 2019. What I'm about to show you are the 2 videos that I took of Winkelmann on my 2 visits there, once in February of 2021 and once in April of 2023. In each of these videos, you can see the progression of decline that Winkelmann goes through as each of these structures that Ray saved and put on this property are progressively torn down and done away with until there's only one left. So first, here's the footage that I took from 2021. And now here's the footage that we took this month in 2023, perhaps the final footage of any structure at Winkelmann that might ever be taken. Who knows?